Welcome, everyone. Thank you again for attending today's session. It's great to see all of you who are attending live. We'll go ahead and get started. For those of you who are watching a recording of this event, today is June 18th, and my name is Siam Rezwan, Chair of the Global Health Leaders Conference. Students, I know many of you are excited to be hearing from Mr. Sal Khan today, but may be wondering, how does Sal Khan and Khan Academy tie into global health? Studies have shown that adults with higher educational attainment live healthier and longer lives compared to less educated peers. Education is also likely to lead to, for example, better jobs, healthcare, higher income, and greater access to health promoting resources. Today, we'll be learning from Sal Khan, one of the world's most influential educators, whose work has impacted millions around the world. He is the founder of Khan Academy, a nonprofit educational organization with the mission of providing a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. Today, millions of students, parents, and teachers use Khan Academy software and thousands of videos. And as of today, Khan Academy's YouTube channel has over 7 million subscribers and almost 2 billion views in total. Schools around the world seek Sal Khan's advice about connecting to students in the digital age, and people of all ages and backgrounds use the Khan Academy site for its fresh approach to learning. Mr. Khan, it's an honor to have you in our program today. Thank you so much for joining.
Honored to be here.
To start off our session today, could you tell us a bit about how Khan Academy came to be and what inspired you to establish it?
Sure, I'll give you the relatively short answer. I could talk for a long time about that, but some of y'all know back in my original background was in technology. Then I go to business school. Then I find myself working as a hedge fund analyst. And I was a year out of business school. I had just gotten married, and my family was visiting me from New Orleans, which is where I was born and raised. And it just came out of conversation that my 12-year-old cousin, Nadia, was having trouble in math. So I offered to tutor her. So she goes back to New Orleans. I start remote tutoring her slowly but surely. She gets up to speed. At that point, I become what I call a tiger cousin. I called up her school and I said, I really think Nadia Rahman should be able to retake that placement exam from last year. They said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm her cousin." And they let her. And the same Nadia who was in a slower math track was then put into an advanced math track. So I was hooked. I was having fun. I was able to connect with family that was far away. I liked, frankly, geeking out on a lot of the academic stuff that you don't often get to do when you go into the real world. And so I started tutoring her younger brothers, and word spreads in my family that free tutoring is going on. And so before I knew it, I was tutoring 10, 15 cousins, family, friends all over the country every day after work. As soon as markets closed, I would get on the, instant messenger and the phone and whatever else. And I saw a pattern that the reason why my cousins were struggling wasn't because they weren't trying hard, wasn't because they weren't bright, wasn't because they didn't have good teachers. It was primarily they just had gaps in their knowledge. In some cases, they were just looking at it the wrong way. They were memorizing versus understanding. And so I tried, obviously, to address that in the live sessions, but having a background in software, and I always like to fiddle, I started writing software for them that would give them more practice, for me as their tutor to keep track of what they were getting right and wrong and things like that. And then a friend suggested that I make videos to complement that software. And it was just a homebrew project for my family at the time. And I initially thought that the idea of making, and my friend explicitly said, "You should put your videos on YouTube." I said, "That's a horrible idea. YouTube's for cats playing piano." But I gave it a shot anyway. And, though, if you look at some of the early videos from 2006, they are, you'll see like, "Welcome to level 4, whatever." And that was the little software module I was writing. But anyways, as many of y'all know, the videos kind of caught on. My cousin's family told me they like me better on YouTube than in person. But I've always, even though the videos were the way that I think many people first and often still do kind of have their introduction to Khan Academy, I've always viewed as the real focal point, how do we give people the opportunity, the incentive to learn at their own pace, to get practice, to get feedback, to be able to go fill in any gaps that they might have so that they can build on top of that, on strong foundations. So you fast forward to 2009, there were about 50 to 100,000 folks who were using the software in the videos. I had trouble focusing on my day job. That's when I set it up as a not-for-profit with the mission, free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And that's also, my wife and I looked at our finances. She's, another connection to healthcare. My wife is a physician, so she was doing her fellowship in rheumatology at the time out here in Northern California. And so we're like, our first child had just been born. We're like, okay, she agreed that there's something here. So I said, hey, let me see if I can find someone to fund this as a not-for-profit. And I think anytime you do anything entrepreneurial, you have to have a little bit of delusional optimism, and you quickly hit reality. A lot of people say no, but by the end of that year, and it was a tough year, but by the end of that year, we had some of our first philanthropic funding to become a real organization. And so, that's kind of been that was the early stages. And then, the last 13, what was it? 13 years or so have been an exciting ride.
Yeah, that's incredible. So obviously, providing a free world-class education for anyone anywhere is a tremendous undertaking. So what have been some of the largest obstacles for you and Khan Academy in fulfilling this mission?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's there's an internal obstacle and an external obstacle. The internal obstacle is you have this big, as you mentioned, hairy ambition, free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. That's arguably the mission of the global public education system, which is, I believe, a $5 trillion system. And, at the time, I was just one guy operating in a walk-in closet. Now Khan Academy is more. We're over 200 people now, but still, we're the budget of a large high school in the United States. And obviously, we still have this gargantuan, some people would even say delusional mission. So the first question is, what's your vector for trying to do that? And I think we're still a relatively young organization, but especially in the very early stages, how do we do that? There's one path where we could have been kind of a YouTube video site. We explicitly decided not to do that because, hey, we think the real learning, I'm about to sneeze. Wait, give me a second. I didn't sneeze. All right, it'll happen in a few seconds. The real learning happens because people get practice and feedback. So we made that decision. Then there's the decision, okay, do you try to go straight to students and families, which is really where we started, or do you try to work through the traditional school system? And that's something there's been a tension there for really the past decade. And, our answer ended up being we should do both. How much do we focus on the US, which is where we got started, in English, versus the rest of the world? There's now 55 localization efforts around the world. Do we focus on math and then math and science, or should we cover all topics immediately? These are all been tensions, and we've been trying to resolve them, and we're still trying to resolve some of those. I think externally, one, on the philanthropic side, we are a new type of not-for-profit where the social return on investment's off the charts. Most of philanthropy is kind of, if I'm a not-for-profit, you give me $1, I take 10 cents for overhead, and then I give 90 cents for someone to do something good, give them a mosquito net or whatever. This is kind of a new type of not-for-profit where you're providing resources to build something that can then really, really, really scale and has, and deliver something that's hopefully very high value at very close to zero marginal cost. So I think we've done a decent job of convincing people. Obviously, we've had to raise this budget every year, but I do think it's such a no-brainer. And if you see how much money is spent, even in education philanthropy, I think in a rational world, we would be less resource constrained. So that's one thing. And then I think, it's just reach and awareness. I'm guessing many of y'all, by virtue of you're here, probably used Khan Academy at least a little bit. We find a lot of families who are in the know, so to speak, are using Khan Academy pretty intensely, but a lot of families who need it more, families who are lower income, whose parents did not go to college, international families, they either don't know about Khan Academy or they're skeptical of it. They're skeptical of something that is free, because in a lot of places, they've been conditioned to think that a free thing can't be good, even though we have more efficacy studies than any of the alternatives, and I think are provably better than things that people might pay a lot of money for. So yeah, I think those are the big ones. Where do you focus? Where do you put your energies? And how do you make sure that people see the value of what you're trying to do?
Thank you. Yeah. So focusing on one of the things you mentioned, so Khan Academy has obviously grown to include a wide variety of courses, but still has a very strong emphasis on STEM subjects such as math and science. So what are your thoughts on the importance of an arts and humanities-based education in today's society?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. But what I think one thing that we have done reasonably well at Khan Academy over the years is have a fairly pragmatic approach to things. And the reality is, if the place where people are struggling the most, where they're feeling gated from their aspirations, is in STEM. I would say math is the place where most people oftentimes hit a wall. And I think it's because they might have had a gap from dividing decimals in 5th grade or fractions in 6th grade, and then they get to an algebra class and they struggle. I'm guessing not this crowd that I'm talking to now, but 60% of kids in the US, when they go to college, and these are the kids who actually graduate from high school, decide to go to college. So that's already the top half of kids in the US statistically. 60% of them have to get remediation at the pre-algebra level when they go to college. So even though they've been taking years of classes called Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Pre-Calc, they go to college and say, wait, hold on a second. You have so many gaps. We're going to take you back to 7th grade. That to me is a travesty. Think about the resources, the time, the hit to someone's self-esteem when something like that happens. And the science subjects are not far behind. Physics, chemistry, biology, these are the things. And then obviously if you go into sophomore level courses, organic chemistry, et cetera, et cetera. These are the things that keep people from becoming a physician, from becoming an engineer, from becoming whatever. Not that everyone has to become a physician or an engineer, but it's a shame. There's some stats, I don't know the exact numbers. It's something like 60% of people aspire to be STEM majors when they go to college. And one, they might find it interesting. And they also know it's pragmatic on a lot of levels. The world, no matter what you go into, is becoming more STEM focused. But then of that 60%, only 25% of the 60% or something like that, some stat like that, are able to do it because the rest of the kids hit a wall in college algebra and calculus and organic chemistry and chemistry, whatever it might be. So that's why we started there. But I think and we've already gone into some of the humanities. I think there is an opportunity. Things like history, incredibly polarizing that right now in the United States. It doesn't have to be. There's ways to create kind of a archetype, a canonical course that people can learn at their own time and pace that I think 90% of people can get behind. So I think we have a role in things like that as well.
Great point. So moving to the current state of the world and living through the COVID pandemic, global health challenges such as COVID-19 have impacted virtually all aspects of society we've seen, including education, which has obviously undergone tremendous changes throughout the last 2 years. How has Khan Academy been impacted by the pandemic, and what has its role been in mitigating the challenges posed to schooling and education during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's still a little foggy. In the early days of the pandemic, with the school closures, our traffic tripled. And then I think as we went further through the pandemic, and we're still kind of in a pandemic or post-pandemic state right now, it's the school system's been weird. I think a lot of people, our traffic tripled. Then a lot of the school districts started saying, okay, let's just transplant what we used to do in person to 5 to 7 hours of Zoom a day. I think that's a miserable experience. No one can do 5 to 7 hours of Zoom a day. It created a lot of fatigue, screen fatigue and other forms of fatigue, and mental fatigue and emotional fatigue for students and for teachers. You combine that and with the last 2 years of, oh, are we opening? Are we not opening? Okay, we open. Do we wear masks? Do we not wear masks? Oh, wow, 2 of the teachers are sick. All right, who's going to cover them? Or one of the students are sick. Okay, does everyone else still go to school? These types of things have just, I think, one point of uncertainty, one hit after another to the global school system. We know what's happened. Students have learned a lot less over the last 2 years. And, the stats I told you about 60% of kids having to remediate when they go to college, that was pre-pandemic. And we now know that things are worse. And that's in math. And we know it's bad in reading. Things like science don't get tested as frequently, but I suspect it's just as bad there. We know that teachers, especially STEM teachers, are leaving the profession at record rates, just at a time that we need, I almost think it's like a Marshall Plan for education. We need more ability for students to fill in all these gaps. I remember reading a stat many years ago. I hope it's not true anymore, but this was many years ago, that they would, because it took so long to build a prison, they would plan prisons based on 4th grade test scores because the correlation is so strong between the two. And so if we don't really try to make sure that students have the opportunity and the incentive to fill in their gaps and have a strong foundation, potentially have alternative mechanisms for recovering credit and really mastering the concepts, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so that's what we see our role is. We're working with school districts. We have a whole district offering now. This is a muscle we've been building over the last several years. But I'm also working with the team to explore ways, hey, if someone gets mastery on Khan Academy, can they get college credit for it? Can they get high school credit for it so that we're not dependent on the system in the same way? We also launched another not-for-profit, schoolhouse.world. Many of y'all might want to check it out. It's a platform for tutoring, free tutoring. Anyone in the world can get free tutoring. How do we give free tutoring? Well, it leverages volunteership. Many of the tutors, some of them are adults and they're professors' places, but a lot of them are all of y'all who are tutoring on schoolhouse.world. And universities like MIT, like University of Chicago, Case Western, still working on Johns Hopkins, they're actually asking for, as an optional part of your college application, your schoolhouse.world tutoring profile, because they recognize that it's one thing to get a 5 on AP Calculus or AP Biology. It's a whole other thing to be a highly rated tutor of AP Calculus or AP Biology or SAT or whatever it might be, because that clearly the material, but you can also communicate, you've retained the material and you didn't just cram it for an exam. You have empathy. It's community service with kind of a standardized measure of quality. So like, oh, not only did they volunteer, but they are a really good teacher. So I encourage all y'all to look at that. And we're looking at other universities, and I'm actually looking at employers to convince them to take this very seriously. I went to McKinsey and I said, look, I showed them a profile of a 16-year-old in Ohio who was one of our top tutors of statistics. And I'm like, why wouldn't you give her an internship tomorrow? Do you even care where she went to college or if she goes to college or her GPA? And I hope eventually we can do the same thing with health education as well. If someone can tutor something, I think it's and I would say that the correlation to your earlier point, Sam, about education and healthcare. I think the best healthcare providers are good educators. I mean, my wife tells me all of the time that compliance is the biggest issue in healthcare. Can you even convince someone to take the pill? Can you even just make them aware of what high blood sugar means, et cetera? And that takes a lot of the same skills as what a good tutor would do.
Thank you. Yeah, and schoolhouse.world is an incredible platform. Students definitely do check it out when you get the chance. So also, the pandemic has exposed and taught the world about misinformation and disinformation. So what do you think the role of educators and platforms such as Khan Academy have, if any, in developing a more scientifically literate population?
Yeah, I think this is one of the ironies of the internet, is that when it came about, we're like, wow, everyone's going to have access to information, and then it took us a few decades to realize, oh wait, but everyone can publish information, and not all publishers are equally credible. And I remember someone drew the metaphor that one of the times that people are most at risk of dehydration is during floods. Right, there's a flood of water, but it's dirty water, and there's no clean drinking water. There's an irony there, and I think something similar is happening right now, that we're having a dehydration of real knowledge and facts, because there's a flood of whatever you want to call it, shady information, and you don't know. Some of it might be good, but you don't know what you can drink and what you can't, or what you should drink and what you shouldn't. So I do view Khan Academy as hopefully one of the I like to, my argument for one of the arguments for making Khan Academy not for profit is that any space, whether it's a physical or virtual space, needs institutions. I'm a diehard capitalist, et cetera, but in the physical realm, you need hospitals, you need libraries, you need police stations, you need these things to make sure that society functions, set up the guardrails, and then let industry do what it can within those guardrails, and you have a successful society. The internet, it didn't come out of the gate with those institutions. And if you kind of unfettered capitalism, I don't think would necessarily make some of those institutions happen in the way that we would want to have it happen. And so I hope Khan Academy can be one of those institutions on the internet where people are like, oh, I trust them, I get what their motivations are. Their true bottom line is truly just education, mine and my family's education, that they see that we are trying our best to not be political, but make sure that everyone has information so that they can make their own decisions. So yeah, I absolutely see that that's one of our, and I hope there's more things like it, or we can also help, other parts. Right now, we're obviously doing core academics from pre-K through the core of college. We do some test prep, many of y'all know, on LSAT, MCAT, SAT as well. I've always said there should be a Khan Academy for healthcare, where you right now, if you have an illness, you do a web search, you get WebMD, you get like 2 paragraphs, and then you get all the crazy stuff on YouTube or whatever else. it feels like a no-brainer for me, for somebody to do something where you go interview experts, conversational style, where anyone, if God forbid you got cancer or a heart disease or whatever else, you can go and listen to the experts and also get, contrasting opinions and make your own decision. But yeah, I hope there's more of that.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully one day we see a Khan Academy for healthcare. That'd be amazing. But given the complex relationship between education and so many societal factors such as healthcare and socioeconomic status, as we've touched on, could you share some examples of the impact that access to education through a Khan Academy has had on some of its students and their families?
Oh yeah, I mean, we get awesome letters, and this is what gets me up in the morning to read the letters and comments, and even a couple of y'all have private messaged me about how you've used Khan Academy. It never gets old. I always love to hear that. But there's at least 3 stories, one of which I heard 2 days ago that, are what I always hoped would happen. One is actually 4 story. There's a young girl in Afghanistan. Her name is Sultana. Y'all could do a web search if you look up Sultana, New York Times, Taliban's worst fear. Nicholas Kristof wrote an op-ed about her 4 or 5 years ago. She's 12 years old, couldn't go to school because the Taliban kept her from going to school. She's doing chores at home. Luckily, her family had internet access. She finds out about Khan Academy. She essentially self-teaches herself, first English, but then she has this moment where she realizes she's learning more than her brothers in the Taliban controlled school. Later, she realized it's not a high bar, but she just keeps going. She learns all of her math through calculus, biology, chemistry, physics. She decides she wants to become a theoretical physics researcher in the United States. She travels with her family, and she didn't even really tell them about it, to Pakistan so she could take the SAT because it wasn't available in Afghanistan. She does unusually well for someone who essentially has no formal education. She eventually, and the Nicholas Kristof op-ed helped, was able to get a visa to the US, credit to Arizona State University that was willing to accept her with essentially no transcript. And now she is a part of the research staff at Tufts University in quantum computing. So that's a good story. Another one, I was speaking at Stanford about 2 years ago, and a session like this, I said, anyone have any questions? This gentleman, he looked in his 30s, raises his hand. I say, oh yeah, a question. The guy just starts crying. I'm like, oh wow, where's this going to go? And he says how at age 18, he was arrested for dealing marijuana. He got a 30-year sentence in jail in Illinois, which is kind of wild. But while he was in jail, his mom started giving him transcripts of Khan Academy videos because they didn't even have access to the internet. Through the transcripts, he starts learning. He has his sentence reduced to 15 years. He's now like 32 years old, 33 years old, gets out of jail, enrolls in the community college, and now has like full access to Khan Academy. And so he's like a kid in a candy store. He just learns everything. He eventually decides he wants to transfer to 4-year college. He takes the SAT. He does very well, and he's able to transfer to Stanford University as a computer science major. And he was sitting in that class for, essentially 3rd-year computer science majors on entrepreneurship. And now he started he's graduated, and he started an effort to reskill people. So once again, it shows the multiplier effect. I could, just 2 days ago, I was at a conference, and this young man in England, I was in England 2 days ago, he comes running up, Mr. Khan, and he starts telling me his story. He grew up poor in, I just posted it on LinkedIn. I said, can I take a video of you? And he grew up poor in kind of low income housing in the UK. He discovers Khan Academy. He's able to use that at a young age to get a scholarship to a boarding school in the UK. He continues to use Khan Academy. He does well on his GCSEs, goes to university. And now at 24, he's started and sold 2 successful companies. So I'm also hitting him up to become a donor. But that's the dream, that, we want to move the whole distribution, but I also believe that I'd like to view myself as like a Professor Xavier of the X-Men, that there's going to be these, mutants all over the world, that if you just allow them to tap into their powers, they'll be able to save the planet.
Those are some really incredible stories, and just shows how impactful, Khan Academy is on so many people's lives. So as we're running out of time for today's session, as most of us attending live still have quite a lot of schooling ahead of us, such as finishing high school, getting through college, and perhaps graduate school, Do you have any advice for students in this age as they progress through their education?
Yeah, take it for what it's worth. But I think you're frankly at any age, but I remember being in y'all's shoes. There's a lot of tensions that you're facing. You have this tension between, hey, I want to do what's practical, get a good job, pay the bills, buy a house, support my family, but I also want to make my dent in the universe. I also want to try something entrepreneurial. I also want to discover something or make something or whatever it is. So that's a tension, or it feels like a tension. There's often a tension between being humble and saying, hey, look, I'm just going to try to do my part, and I'm just one of 7 billion people on the planet. Who am I to really stick out? At the same time saying, well, someone's got to stick out if you want to do something of note. And maybe if I don't do it, who is? And that's another tension, that humility and that self-doubt versus the confidence and being willing to step up and stick your head out. And there's other tensions. I think the trick is to not let those tensions stress you out and to really embrace that tension. If you're feeling the tension, you're probably in the right place. If you're not feeling the tension, I would argue that you've probably overshot on one end or the other. If you never have that self-doubt, you probably should. And if you never have those moments of thinking big and dreaming big, you probably have too much self-doubt. If you are never fiddling and making things and being a little entrepreneurial or trying to discover something, you're not doing that enough. But if you haven't thought at all about, wait, am I going to be able to get a job? Am I going to be able to save money? Then you probably overcompensated in one direction or another. So, what I tell folks is, just do all the things you need to do to build yourself a strong foundation, academically, credibility wise, career wise, financially. But at the same time, always leave some space for you to fiddle, for you to play, for you to not forget what you were doing. I remember when I was y'all's age, a lot of, you sit in the college dorm room and you daydream about, wow, if I had this much money, I would do this one day, and I would do this, and I hope I can do that. And I've seen some of my peers who went on the pragmatic route, and they now do have enough money to do that, but they've forgotten what they would do. They forgot all the stuff that they used to say in the dorm room. And so but some of my peers have remembered, and they kept fiddling. And so they are able to kind of live out their dorm room dreams that they used to talk about. So yeah, I think it's all about embracing that tension and making sure you have space, that you're always fiddling. Ask a ton of questions, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to, most people, if we see strangers, we all try to play it cool. Like, why would they want to talk to us and all of that? But I found if you're the one that put yourself out there, you're always smiling, projecting positive energy, a lot of that positive energy will eventually come back.
Well, thank you. That's incredible advice. Well, Mr. Khan, it was great to learn from you and hear your thoughts and insights today at our 2022 Global Health Leaders Conference at Johns Hopkins. Thank you so much for participating and for everything you and the Khan Academy team have been doing and continue to do. You're so inspirational, and we wish you the very best.
No, thanks for having me. I look forward to see what y'all do. I'm about to sneeze. Wait, give me a second. I didn't sneeze. All right, it'll happen in a few seconds.